Hello everyone and welcome back to another Horror O'Clock video. Today we're kickstarting a new series where we read the most horrifying stories from Reddit. I want to say I've never owned a Reddit account even since 2023, so I just made one for the channel. We're going to read some stories from some popular horror channel pages. I don't know what you call them on Reddit, so yeah, anyway. The first one that we are going to be reading, so it's from the Reddit page No Sleep, and it is The Man Living in My Mum's Old House. And the story is, the man living in my mum's old house has been causing me trouble recently. So let's have a read of this. There had always been a man in my attic, well, as long as I had owned it. After my mother passed, I inherited her house. I never heard of anyone living there until then, but over time, I'd come to accept the squatter. My mum taught me well to let good enough things be. He never bothered me, and from time to time, I would even find overnight things would seem to be fixed, from bugged light bulbs to creaky doors. I assumed the man helped me out for letting him stay. This was nice because I didn't have tools around the house, and I don't like calling people to fix things for me. Call it laziness, but I left him. We had our peace. I never did see the man. I could hear him though. Speaking of hearing, that's where my story began. It had been a particularly stressful day of work, working overtime, and I was ready to pass out. As my eyes grew heavy from the blue glow of my television, I was ready to call it a night, but I couldn't. It was the man. He was doing something up there, in the attic. An instinctual shiver shot up my back when I was rudely awoken by loud crashes and bangs coming from above. Usually he's quiet enough, but this night he had been making such a racket I couldn't even hear my TV, hardly even my own thoughts. Thump, a thump, thump, rackety bang bang, thump a thump thump, rackety bang bang. This onomatopoeia is so funny. What the fuck was he doing up there? Did he have a drum set? Was he playing with power tools? I had never seen him and preferred to keep it that way, so I tried to ignore it and just let the man stay and mind his own business. But when I can't even mind what I'm supposed to do, this is my house, who does he think he is? The pounding above my head creeped into my head, a throbbing headache. Each pound of the floorboards, a new beat against my temple. Enough is enough. I could hear myself think, or maybe say, scream. Everything that night is a hazy drunken blur. Up the stairs I went, sloughing along the guardrail, caught in an enraged stupor. He's dead, I thought, or maybe said. I'll kill him. I reached the final step. I pulled down the hatch to the final floor, the attic, and nothing. There was no sound. It was like pulling down the hatch to the attic ended the noise, somehow. I peeked my head into the room, the throbbing in my head slowly dissipating, and saw nothing. There was no man, no tools, only a few spare boxes holding my late mother's old possessions. The rest of the night was silence, eerily silent. My thoughts seemed louder than life. Thankfully the swirl of panic and rage from the night slowly trickled down and I could find rest. This did not last long though. Thump a thump thump, rackety bang bang, thump a thump. I can't with this onomatopoeia. The exact noise from the attic, clear as day. He's not getting away this time. I felt myself move as if through a mist. Each motion took no effort. To kill this man would be an easy task, filled with confidence at the grace I found in my body. I took down the hatch to the attic, but this time I wasn't greeted by an ending to the noise. Rather, I was met with a hammer to my head. and my vision turned black. Immediately, I started from my slumber, looking around the room. I gathered my senses. I could feel my body in my bed. I could hear my fan whirring. I was alive. Brushing it off as a nightmare, I laid myself back to rest, trying to ignore the pool of sweat I was laying. Yet, after the incident, I never again had a restful night. The same nightmare haunted me over and over. I relieved my death time and time again. Every time I would wake up in my bed in a cold sweat, panicked, thankful to be alive, but dreading the next night. I can't say for sure why this happened to me, or that it continues to. I never heard the man in my waking hours, only during rest. The only explanation I can come up with is advice my mum would always tell me, that I didn't follow that night. Let good enough things be. Also, one thing that I'm going to be doing, each story that I read, I'm going to be crediting the user. So, for that first story, our user was Alan the Guy 345. So now let's move on to our next horror story. Okay, this next story is called Never Walk Alone by user Johan66. If I said that wrong, I'm sorry, but that will be on screen as well. Okay. I work in retail in a pretty busy part of town. I'm scheduled almost every day and often end up working late into the night. I live pretty close to the store, so I've always walked to and from. On this particular night, it was already in the morning. The usually crowded sidewalks were now barren. I was alone out here, and honestly, it felt pretty creepy. As I continued to walk, I noticed a guy standing to himself. He seemed kinda strange, all frigidity and staring at the ground. He was dressed in all black and had a hood on, so I couldn't see his face. He made me uncomfortable, like I should have taken a different path. Then again, I'd been working all day. I wanted to go home, and I wasn't gonna let some weirdo worry me. So I switched my attention to my phone and walked right past him. I wish that was the end of our meeting, but it was just the beginning. "Hey man, got a smoke?" he asked. I didn't smoke, so I shook my head and kept walking. What happened next though was downright terrifying. As the guy casually started to follow me, what's worse was that I finally got a glimpse at his face, or lack thereof. This freak was wearing a Halloween mask in April. It was one of those scary orange pumpkin masks with bloody teeth. In fact, I think our store sold them. Fucking hell. Knowing his intentions weren't good, I started to walk faster, and of course, he did the same. I considered myself to be a brave guy, and I was getting sick of this game, so I turned around and gave the loser a piece of my mind. "Get out of here before I hurt you, freak." Instead of scaring him like I'd hoped, my words seemed to excite the man. "Ooh, tough guy. This is gonna be fun," he chuckled. He then pulled an extremely long kitchen knife from his jacket and held it in the air. I doubt he got that knife from your store. My first and only instinct was to run and not stop. He seemed to enjoy this, and he pursued me while giggling like an excited child. I ran from this freak at full speed, but he didn't have any issues keeping up with me. I had never been in the best of shape, and maybe tonight I was praying for it. Thankfully, I saw an alleyway as I was fleeing. That is a sentence I never thought I would hear. I quickly took a turn and sprinted into the darkness, figuring he wasn't far behind. I dived behind a dumpster for cover. By this point, I was out of breath, but I had to stay quiet. I covered my mouth and prayed for this psycho to go away. Unfortunately for me, I heard footsteps coming into my direction. I poked my head out and saw him dragging his knife down a brick wall. He then let out another twisted giggle before speaking again. "A game of hide and seek. Sounds like a blast, my little piggy." He then started to playfully prance around like a ballerina, humming an upbeat tune while searching for me. There was no other words to describe his behavior except for absolute madness. This masked psychopath was having the time of his life chasing after me. Pretty soon, he'd approached my hiding spot. It was safe to say that I was terrified. What happened next, however, was something neither of us expected, as a seemingly drunk homeless man stumbled onto the scene. He held a bottle of liquor and gave the psycho a ticked-off look. "Hey man, this is my territory here. You need to roll on before you get hurt." Clearly, the old man didn't know what kind of person he was dealing with. Seeing the creepy jack-o'-lantern mask made him take a step back. "Hey man, are you on something?" the guy asked, saying nothing. My stalker approached the man with a knife drawn. I then watched in horror as he plunged his blade into the man's stomach. I watched helplessly as he stabbed this innocent old guy over and over. The blood gushed out like a fountain. His groans of pain was something I'd never forget. I should have tried to help the guy, but I was in utter shock. Watching his life slowly leave this person's body was something I didn't want to see. Proud of his work, the killer began smearing the fresh crimson onto his mask. After he let out his creepy moan, feeling utter bliss when killing someone, I couldn't watch anymore. I had to get out of here now. I darted from behind the dumpster in an attempt to escape. Unfortunately though, the killer was closer to me than I thought. As he reached out and slashed my back with his already blood-soaked knife, I yelled out in pain, but I did not stop moving. One could only imagine what he'd do if I did. On top of my current circumstances, I had already worked an 8-hour shift. I was utterly exhausted and didn't know how much longer I could run. Meanwhile, my stalker kept pursuing me like his stamina was infinite. It was only a matter of time before I ended up his second victim. Thankfully, as if fate wanted me to survive this night, I came upon a police station. The relief I felt was unreal. Naturally, I dashed up the steps and entered into the safe haven. Inside, officers sat around, talking and sipping late-night cups of coffee. I looked back with a smile, thinking my worries were over. However, this nightmare wouldn't end just yet. As the killer ran into the station after me, knife drawn and everything, he had to be out of his mind, as if the only thing that mattered to him was taking my life. "Hey, that freak's trying to kill me," I yelled out. The officers were quick to react and sprung into action. Within seconds, tasers were drawn and the pumpkin mask killer was brought to his knees. I swear he'd been hit about 6 times. Regardless of this, he kept coming, now on the ground. He gripped his knife and began crawling towards me. The officers were in shock. I was freaking petrified. He crawled and crawled, wanting so desperately to reach me. Thankfully, his body would succumb to all the electricity flowing through his veins. As he passed out right in front of me, it was finally over. The cops cuffed him and pulled his mask off. His face was covered in deep scratches and sores. His curly red hair was matted and covered in grease. Everyone could tell this guy was sick. Maybe he was on something. I'd soon be brought to the hospital, where I received 8 stitches in my back. In the following weeks, a lot happened. I was questioned by police, got to pay my respects at the old man's funeral, but things culminated when the trial started. I testified and recounted the entire bloody story, even on Reddit. He didn't say that, by the way, that part. Meanwhile, the killer sat with a huge smile as I took the stand. That he was a nutcase who was extremely obsessed with serial killers. He idolized people that brutally murdered others and wanted to start his own legacy. Thankfully, his bloody dream would never be realized, as he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in an asylum. I'll never forget his final words to me before being taken away in shackles. "Goodbye, my little piggy, I'm gonna miss you." I'd never seen him again after that. While I was relieved, my life quickly changed. I joined a gym and got into shape. I also started taking self-defense classes. I even carried a concealed weapon in case all else failed. I refused to become another statistic. The terror that I felt that night would not define who I am. Next time, I was going to be ready. I was going to survive, no matter what. And let's just hope there isn't a next time. So that story got scarier and scarier. I didn't read any of these stories beforehand, so it was as much as a surprise as it was to you guys. So there are the stories that I am going to read in today's video. If you like this series, I am planning to carry this on because there's so many great storytellers on Reddit. Now these could be real stories. This second one though, I'm leaning more on the fence that it was written. Either way, it was entertaining, a bit gory, but yeah, thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next video.